We're talking about just gay stuff.
I really hope you keep my laughing track in there.
I can do if you want me to.
Hello and welcome back to another week of Just Gay Stuff podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Jess. And to start this episode off, even though we're a bit crazy, which is nothing out of the
this
ordinary.
is nothing new. We're always crazy every week.
Do you remember a few episodes ago, we were dribbling on about something and I said the term...
Dribbling on about something. We're always dribbling on about something. That's like the point of podcasting.
Well, this is the thing. I was dribbling on about something and I said the term, I didn't come down in the last shower.
Oh, yes, I do.
So do you remember what that term means?
No.
You don't?
No, and I know you only just told me recently.
Okay, so for anyone out there who's like Lauren and has no idea, it means like I'm not as stupid as you think, in the same way the term like I wasn't born yesterday.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I
like,
did know that one.
You aren't dumb and you're not only just learning the world.
According to this, I was born in the last shower.
No, you've just mixed the two now.
Oh.
I didn't come down in the last shower and I wasn't born yesterday. Well, speaking of these weird slang terms, I've come to believe, I've come to know,
knowledge, yeah.
that there have been some truly horrible sayings that have been around in the generations. And I feel like when you spend time with people from other generations that have lived incredibly before you.
Like especially people like your gran, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You really start to see the gap. And funny you mentioned my gran because I'm about to tell a story about her.
Oh, no.
So, for example, my gran has some really colourful sayings that really are not appropriate for nowadays.
I think it's not appropriate in general, but I guess, like you said, the generational gap, people didn't know any better.
See, like my gran was born in the 30s, right?
Really?
Yeah. So back when she was a teenager and a young mum, she would have been 20 something, so it would have been like the early 50s.
And so she was still in a time of where segregation was a thing.
To be honest, I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
But I know that like some terms to describe different people in different cultures and marginalized groups, those slang terms for those people were so like okay to say.
Right.
So for example, I was driving in the car with my gran one day and I sneezed. And to that she responded, "Bless your cotton socks." And then she said, "Bless you and all the little N-word boys."
You cannot say that.
Exactly. And I'm
Although
sure
I
everyone knows what I mean when I say N-word boys.
I'm sure they do. I did actually know the Bless Your Cotton Socks one, which I was very surprised that I knew one.
Yeah. Well, I think that one comes from like a religious thing because you're supposed to only wear cotton in religion or something like that.
Is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
Anyway, I digress.
I was like, we're not religious on this podcast.
The next time, my mum had told my gran that I hadn't seen her for a few weeks because I'd been working really hard and I just didn't have the time. And she responded with, "Oh yeah, Jess has been working hard again like a little N-word. So Jess has been working hard like a N-word."
That's terrible.
And I'm over here thinking, like, I know as Australians, we come from a very laid back society. We have a very laid back attitude and kind of we revel in the self-deprecating humor. But I kind of think, like, how the hell were these sayings ever appropriate? And we've come such a long way. And so it also got me thinking of some of those other classic Australian slang sayings that make absolutely no sense.
Oh, God.
But I
am
want to
so
know,
scared.
as an Australian, do you, Lauren, know what they mean?
Probably not. I am terrible with
Well, you weren't born yesterday,
No,
so
I
let's see.
wasn't.
Let's see.
Although I mixed those two sayings up
You
before,
did.
so we'll
You
be
did.
as good as we can get.
So everyone, for the beginning of this episode, I want you to play along at home. And some of these are easier than others, but even some of these I had never heard before. And I love when it confuses the hell out of our friends that have come from like different cultures and different countries.
I'm from Australia. It confuses the hell out of me.
Yeah, so let's start with an easy one.
Oh, God.
Lauren, what does it mean when I say flat out like a lizard drinking?
Oh, flat out like a lizard drinking.
A, have you heard it before? And B, do you know what it means?
No, I haven't heard it before. And if I
You've
had,
never
I'm
heard
like,
it
no,
before?
I haven't.
Oh my God.
I told you I've lived under a rock my whole life.
So's the lizard.
Yeah. Maybe just like either two things, either like really lazy, just laying around drinking, having a few bevies. Is that not it?
Ba-bow. Flat
or
out.
just like super super busy.
Yeah,
Like
super
a
busy.
lizard.
Super busy. Flat out
Drinking.
like a lizard drinking it means you've been insanely busy. Kind of like running around like a head with its chook cut off. No.
Running around like a headless chook.
That's what I mean.
I like that. Flat out like a lizard drinking. I think my definition was better.
Which is what? Being lazy.
Being lazy and having a couple bevies.
Okay, what about this next one? Mad as a cut snake. I feel like that one's easy.
No, but just like really angry.
Really angry.
Yeah.
Nah, it's like crazy or mental.
Oh.
Like, I can't say I've ever seen a cut snake, but apparently it looks pretty wild. So,
Like-
kind of like the chicken with its head cut off. All right, now we've all heard this one, although I reckon I hadn't
You're
heard
saying
it.
this, but I haven't heard the past
True.
too. So.
Well, I can say I never heard this as a kid. I've only heard this in the last few years. And I think that's probably because there's a swear word in it.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not here to fuck spiders.
Wait, okay. How long ago was it when you heard this one? I do know this one.
Probably in the last 10 years.
Okay. Actually, yeah, probably same.
I
No,
hadn't
maybe
heard
it
it-
was earlier. Maybe it was in like teenage years.
Nah, see, I definitely never heard it as a teenager. And I definitely never heard it in my early 20s or as a kid. I feel like in the last, like late 20s, in the last 10 years, I've been like, okay, I know what this means.
Yeah, this one I knew.
So what's it mean?
It means like here to get shit done. I'm like, I'm here. I'm not
Yeah.
here to be like.
Not here to fuck around.
Yeah, not here to fuck around. Not here to be stupid. Like,
Okay, well, the next one I hadn't heard, but I'd heard an equivalent, and that is a few roos loose in the top paddock.
I had not heard that until we discussed that at the dinner table.
So what does it mean?
Bit crazy.
Bit
like
crazy.
Like one screw loose kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it means that you're a bit silly or a bit crazy or you're not aware, you know.
So every time we record Just Gay Stuff podcast.
Yeah, we're a few roos loose in the top paddock, but really we're just two gays loose in the pod lab in the garage.
Yeah, that one.
We should use that from now on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about this one? Built like a brick shithouse. And my question was, what is a brick shithouse? Is it a toilet?
Okay, but this one confused me because I had heard the saying, but I did not think it was a toilet. And yes, I believe it is a toilet to answer your first question. But when I heard built like a brick shithouse, oh, well, maybe it is built like a brick shithouse, but I just assumed it was like a stocky NRL player.
Yeah, that's exactly what it
is that
is.
what it is?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's used to describe a very solid or muscular person.
Oh, okay. Ooh, one for
Yeah.
Lauren.
A footy player.
A footy player.
Okay, well, it's
Wait,
wildly...
so is it a toilet?
Yeah, a brick
Okay,
shithouse
yeah,
is a
brick
toilet.
shithouse.
But, like, not made out of thin tin. It's
No,
built out
it's
of brick.
like outside. Yeah, wasn't I saying like
You said an outback house.
instead of an
Instead
outdoor
of an outhouse. No,
Yeah.
it's just an outhouse.
Oh, an outhouse.
Okay, well, regardless, it's wildly inappropriate these days to compare how someone looks to a toilet or how a toilet is built.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Next one is one of my favourites, although I have realised that I've been using it wrong this whole time.
Really?
Yep.
Oh.
The next one is going off like a frog in a sock.
I have no idea.
So apparently it means going crazy,
Right.
which I now realise I've used it a lot incorrectly.
What were you saying?
Well, I was always saying it like when I would say goodbye, I'd be like, all right, I'm off like a frog in a sock.
So you're just saying I'm outwardly crazy at you.
Yeah, whereas I thought I was like, oh, I'm off like I'm going.
Like, see you later, alligator. Frog in a sock.
So I've been using that wrong. So now that I know what it means, I will still use it wrong because I love saying, all right, I'm off like a frog in a sock.
Oh, that's hilarious.
All right, the next one, I don't know why, but it's one of my favorites. So, Lauren, what does it mean when someone says you're up the duff?
You are pregnant.
Now, I looked this up
Oh.
because I wanted to know, why is your cooch called a duff?
Wait, is your cooch called a duff?
I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you. So the answer is duff has been an old Northern English pronunciation of raw dough. So it goes hand in hand with the term like bun in the oven, relating to something that's uncooked but it's going to be cooked. So
Right.
something being made in
Right.
pregnancy. I thought that was...
Yeah, that's clever. I just had a terrible thought of like raw dough and vaginas.
It's been a day, hasn't
It
it?
has. Moving
All
on.
right. This next one I'd never heard my whole life, but I love it. Dry as a dead dingo's donger. What's it mean?
What?
We're going from cooches to dongers. Cooches?
Cooches?
Coochies?
Cooch.
What's the
Coochie mamas?
cooches? What's the plural of a cooch?
Cooch. I don't know.
Cooches? Yeah.
Listen,
We're going from cooches to dongers.
Listeners, what is the plural of a cooch?
Coochai?
No, that's a singular.
Like peni. Coochai?
I don't know. Anyways, go to the dongs.
Yeah. What's it mean?
I don't know.
It means you're very thirsty or very dry.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Dryers. I wouldn't have added dong in there, but okay.
Well, I suppose they're saying like a dead dingo is probably like old and stiff and dry. Nothing's running through it. You know what I mean?
You just have to get the old and stiff in there.
Okay. Well, I've got 2 more of these before we explain why any of this is relevant
Yeah,
to
I
the
was
queer
like,
community.
this makes no sense.
Carrying on like a pork chop. One of my favorites.
yeah.
I love this. I use it daily.
Literally just going silly of being like a wild child. We're literally carrying on like pork chops right now.
No, see, I think that's wrong.
Oh, okay.
I would describe carrying on like a pork chop like you're going on about something, like whether it's whinging or, you know, like sometimes when someone's going on about something and you're like, oh, they're just carrying on like a pork chop. Like, for example, my
okay.
gran.
Yeah, right.
My gran carrying on like a bloody pork chop.
Got you.
Yeah. And this one I had never heard used, but I know the equivalents to it. This one is couldn't run a chook raffle.
Right.
Do you know what it means?
No, I don't, but I assume it's just like you're kind of useless. You can't really do anything.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. But my favorite equivalent to this is couldn't organise a root in a brothel. Because that's the main purpose of a brothel is to go and get a root. And if you can't find one there, well, then you'd be hopeless, which is exactly what that means.
The chook raffle is the PG version
It
of that saying.
So if ever I'm in a space where I need a PG version, I'm going to say, couldn't organise a chook raffle.
I know we should know a few people who can't organise a chook raffle.
Oh, I know plenty of people. Not mentioning any names. Lauren.
Hey.
I'm just kidding. You're very good at what you do.
Well, considering you've just tricked me into this crazy playing game.
But did you enjoy it?
I did. It was fun. And I hope our audience had fun learning and listening because I had no clue. Like we said at the dinner table, there's so many sayings that like you and your mum say and we're like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, you live under that rock.
I do live under that rock. I have been educated.
You're slowly being educated
Slowly.
by being with me.
I am, yes. And in saying that, I learned a lot of things and I hope our listeners learned some things too. Like,
I'm sure they were screaming at the podcast being like, no, it means this, it means that. Jess, you're an idiot.
no, I think they were saying I was the idiot because, you know, I live under that rock.
Yeah.
But in this week's episode, let's talk about some of the slang that has affected our queer community and how it has changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I know we touched on the topic in one of our very first episodes.
We did.
We did, where we talked about terms like sapphic and stem.
Mm-hmm.
But in this week's episode, if you haven't already gathered by the title, we're going to go into a deep dive about the evolution of queer language and slang history.
There's so much, isn't there?
There is so much. And I actually said to you when I was researching this episode that whilst this might be a little bit more educational and a little bit more boring than the fun game we just played, honestly, it was so interesting to me.
Eye-opening and
yeah,
important.
eye-opening and important to me. But as a language nerd, that's my
Yeah.
thing. And I could have gone on and on.
Well, okay, let us sit back and relax. And Lauren, you take the microphone.
Yes, and get ready for another Just Gay Stuff history lesson.
I don't mind a history lesson.
Well, as we just said before, queer language has always been more than just a method of communication. It's a dynamic, powerful cultural force forged through necessity and resilience, unlike some of the Aussie slang we heard earlier.
Yeah, it was definitely not necessary, and I don't know where half of it came from.
I think it's just the fun. Maybe it's just Aussies just abbreviate everything.
I guess it's like one person just comes up with something and then it just carries on.
Sticks. Well, I guess so. And it's the same way in this
Yeah,
terminology
slang
as
just-
you'll kind of learn.
Yeah.
So, across centuries, the LGBTQIA plus communities have crafted and adapted language as both a shield and a sword, a means of carving out space in a world that often sought to erase or punish their existence.
As
I
we
loved
know
that.
all too well. Yeah. Shield and a sword.
Shield
It's
and a
like
sword.
a tool to help fight for you and a tool to help defend you.
Yeah.
That's, so
it was
good.
such a powerful moment when I was researching that. I was like, oh, I like that.
Mm.
In eras of persecution, secret codes like Polari, I hope I'm saying that right because I don't actually know how
I've
you say
never
that.
heard that before.
Yeah, and you'll see why
Yeah,
in a
okay.
minute. In the UK, or drag slang in the US ballroom scene, allowed queer people to identify one another, speak freely in hostile environments, and maintain a sense of belonging when mainstream society offered none. These words became lifelines, symbols of shared experience and defiant survival.
It's crazy to think that we had to develop something outside of the English language to be able to communicate just for our safety.
Literally,
like
it
I
was
think about,
code words.
Yeah, I think about like Morse code
Yeah.
in times of like war when we didn't have telephones and things like that. It's just like this other means of survival.
That's what it is. It's baffling that you still even see it today, that we live in a world where there's such prejudice out there.
Yeah, like if I wanted to know if someone was gay now, I'd ask them what sport they played as a child.
Or who they go for. Do they go for the Matildas?
Yeah, exactly.
As societal visibility grew, especially with the rise of the internet and social media, queer language evolved from whispered slang into bold viral expressions of pride, creativity and protest. Hashtags like queer joy, trans is beautiful, and Yas Queen.
Yas Queen. I've used that one a few times, not gonna lie.
Same. Have not only reshaped online culture, but have also helped reframe how queerness is perceived, celebrated rather than concealed. Every term, from reclaimed slurs to new identities, tells a story of lived experience, political struggle, and the ever-expanding spectrum of self.
Mm-hmm.
Queer language, therefore, is not static. It's living, breathing archive of resistance, intimacy, humour, and the fierce demand to be seen and heard on its own terms.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, especially when the internet first came out, it was, again, a tool where people who were sidelined by society, so like us queers who wanted to find other people like us, used like chat rooms specific to us, and that was kind of hidden away from the rest of the internet. And now we have those social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram where you only have to hit that one hashtag and your queer world is there waiting for you. And the algorithm knows, oh, you've watched 10 seconds of this video.
Here's
So
all the lesbians.
yeah, here's everything you've ever wanted to see in your life.
Yeah.
It's such a tool.
It's a freeing thing, I think, especially even our podcasts, to offer that safe space and that place of being able to have your own self-discovery and exploration.
and for that to be so accessible to you. Yeah,
and
exactly.
no thought or fraught of danger in mind. It's just in the palm of your hand that you can hide away.
Yeah, and it's kind of like there is still danger for those that don't feel that it's safe to come out to their circle or their family or whoever they feel the need to come out to. But there is safety in certain circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you touched on the internet, and I do mention that later.
Okay.
But I'm going to take us all the way back to the origin of queer language.
Which is Polari.
Polari, yeah.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
the origins of queer language can be traced back centuries, and one of the earliest, most documented examples is
Polari.
a rich and secretive and submersive slang used primarily by gay men in Britain from the 1700s to the 1960s.
So I'd say this is in the time where queer men could only be around in theatre.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It served as a linguistic cloak in a time when homosexuality was criminalised and social persecution was rife.
Yeah, totally.
So who used Polari?
The gay men.
The gay men did. Polari wasn't the invention of a single group. It was a living, evolving code shared by people who lived on the fringes of mainstream society.
Us queers.
Us queers. In an era when being openly queer could lead to imprisonment, loss of employment, or public disgrace, Polari allowed gay men to communicate, flirt, and find community without attracting unwanted attention. A subtle word or phrase could signal queerness to another insider, serving as both a shield and a bridge.
Yeah.
Drag queens were another key group who helped maintain and expand the use of Polari, particularly in the underground club scenes of London, Manchester, and Brighton. In these performance spaces, Polari added flamboyance and humour to the stage acts, like you said, theatre, and it reinforced a shared identity offstage. The language thrived on camp exaggeration and wit, and drag performers used it to poke fun at authority, embrace theatricality, and create in-jokes that outsiders wouldn't understand. It gave performers and their audiences a coded way to play with gender, sexuality, and class.
In a way that it would have been accepted, whereas outside of the theatre, it's not. Like, as we've said,
We've
you know...
spoken about that in many other
we
episodes.
have, you know, where performers, it's like, it's okay to consume the queer art, but if you are actually queer, then that's not okay.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Because art's not real, you see.
Oh, yeah.
Quotation marks. Another group were sex workers, particularly those in urban centres and seaside towns. They also adopted Polari as a practical tool.
Yeah, so that doesn't just mean the queer community.
No,
like not just queer sex
not
workers.
Not just the queer sex workers.
It's kind of like when you see on all the crime shows how the sex workers that are lined up on the streets, like you might not always know that they are there like working, but it's kind of like that, hey honey, you want a good time?
Yeah.
They're not like explicitly asking, hey, do you want to pay for a service?
No, it's the code.
Yeah. It's the code.
It's the code. It allowed them to discuss clients, negotiate work, and share warnings in public spaces without drawing the attention of police or passers-by.
Hey, Lauren, you want a good time?
Always. Many queer people, including trans individuals and gay men, were involved in sex work due to societal exclusion from other forms of employment.
Yeah, that sucks.
Does suck. Which helped deepen the connection between queerness and Polari.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, sailors and merchant seamen, who often circulated between global ports, helped spread slang from different languages.
Clever.
These men were no strangers to same-sex relationships and relied on coded language for discretion, especially aboard ships or in port cities where suspicion could mean punishment.
Yeah, wow. It's funny, we say in the beginning, like we've touched on these things before, but it always brings up things you've never thought about.
No, and even researching, there was so much stuff that I was like, oh, I've never actually
thought about
this before. And it is true when you think about back in the day with all like the seamen especially and
well, people in general that have had to travel for their profession and it hasn't been every place you go to is the same. Like there's different punishments, there's different rules, there's different legalities.
I think that especially going back to the seamen thing, it also kind of makes you understand the whole mermaid situation. No?
Explain.
Just in terms of like...
Oh, no, I get what you're saying. Because the mermaids were like a myth, so they would make up that they would see these women, but they weren't actually women.
They weren't actually women. They were with men. I just didn't know how to explain that, but I saw it in my head. I'm glad you got there in the end.
No, I get you.
Well, beyond that, theatre performers, especially those working in pantomime, vaudeville and music halls, were also key to the spread of Polari. Theatre culture provided one of the few socially accepted spaces for gender play and flamboyance.
It's still the same today.
It is.
Yeah.
And backstage banter frequently included Polari terms. Camp humour, quick wit, and creative self-expression were core to these performances, and Polari suited that world perfectly. Likewise, circus performers, travelling showmen, groups had already been noticed for using cant, a type of coded language, adopted and helped spread Polari as they moved across Britain. Because these groups so often overlap in cities and coastal towns, Polari became more than a private slang. It was a shared subcultural dialect. It helped bind people together across professions and locations, creating a loose but powerful sense of community among outsiders in a hostile society.
It's kind of like when you meet other people that have watched, say, Drag Race, and if you say to them, reading is, and they go, fundamental, it's like you're suddenly all on the same level.
Page, the same page, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
However, the language began to decline after the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality in 1967.
Well, that's really a positive thing because it means like they didn't need it as much.
No. As gay rights movement grew more public and politically assertive in the 1970s and 80s, Polari was sometimes seen as outdated or even regressive.
I can see why.
Too tied to the shame and secrecy of earlier decades. It was also parodied in mainstream media, such as the popular BBC radio show Round the Horn, which made the language widely known but also diluted its subversive power.
See, that's where I think they take things a bit too far. Like, you've obviously had to have this tool because it was a necessity for your survival. And then people can ruin the history of that by making it so well known. And then people take the piss.
You and I have never heard of that term until right now. But as we're saying, this started in the 1700s and went all the way to the 1970s.
But I think it's kind of like in the same way that some of our humour is not perceived in the same way as it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. People are also taking the meaning of this out of context and they're like making it a joke when really it was someone's means of survival.
It's true.
And that's not a joke.
No, that's not a joke.
And like, call me woke, whatever. I just think where we can have empathy and compassion, we should.
Yes. Well, despite its decline, the legacy of Polari remains. Many of its terms have filtered into mainstream queer and even general English slang. Words like zhoosh or zhoosh.
Zhoosh? Oh, zhoosh.
Like,
zhoosh.
Zhoosh it up.
Oh, zhoosh it up. Yep. Okay.
Naff and camp.
Never heard naff.
Me neither.
No.
NAF and camp all trace back to Polari.
Okay.
More importantly, its spirit lives on in the coded ways queer people still use language to claim space, build community, and resist erasure. Whether through inside jokes, reclaimed slurs, or digital shorthand, queer language continues to be a form of creative survival. Polari stands out as a vivid reminder of how language can be a sanctuary, a weapon, and a celebration all at once.
That's so true. And I don't know why they call it camp. This is the vision I get when I think...
A tent.
Yeah, essentially. The vision I get when I think of like a camp man is like all these guys going on a camping trip, but they're all wearing booty shorts.
Oh, I like it.
Like picture our very good friend Bob Down in little booty shorts, and he's like running up as his character, maybe like with a sausage on a fork ready to put it on the bonfire.
You're just giving him ideas for his next show. Well, we're going to jump now to the 1900s. We saw this a lot with American culture, where they developed nuanced ways of communicating in response to widespread persecution and social stigma. In an era where being openly queer could result in arrest, violence, or institutionalization, language became a vital tool for survival. Everyday phrases carried double meanings, offering subtle signals of queerness. Queer individuals mastered code switching, adjusting their speech and demeanor depending on the audience to protect themselves. Euphemisms like friend of Dorothy.
Yes, friend of Dorothy, I know that one.
Popular among gay men in World War II military circles. Confirmed bachelor.
I've actually heard that one too.
I hadn't heard confirmed bachelor.
So they're saying like you're a confirmed bachelor because you're not looking for a bachelorette.
Oh!
You are confirmed a bachelor.
Right.
Yeah.
I did know this one. And lavender marriage.
Yes, because lavender is like gay.
Served as discrete identifiers within and outside the community. These linguistic strategies not only protected queer lives, but fostered a hidden network of identity and solidarity.
I'm going to go on a wild run here, and I'm just going to say, because we're talking about American culture and it makes me think of like African American culture. Did you know that the cornrows of African American culture, like how people braided their hair, was actually used as a map for somebody to get out of like a plantation?
No, but that's so cool.
So like people that were slaves in the fields would go and do their work for the day, and then they would come back and braid what they knew of the plantation into either their child or their partner's hair.
Wow.
So that then they knew, okay, well, like if say they're cutting like sugar cane, if I'm going through the cane fields, I will go here and then I'll take a left if it goes. So they followed the braid in their hair.
I had no idea. That's really cool.
That's why cornrows is such a
privilege, cultural thing. So
Yeah.
when people from a different culture, it becomes cultural appropriation.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think it's only cultural misappropriation if people from that culture say that someone else can't have it. But it's also like where it's celebrated, I think other people should be allowed to enjoy those celebratory things.
Yeah.
If it's okay with those people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. As long as it's not discriminatory or
Exactly.
making fun of, as long as it's an
homage.
appreciation
As
and
long
homage.
as, yeah, totally. But I thought that was really interesting. And we were talking about, how it's a vital tool and how people had to create these ways for survival.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I had no idea. Well, I do need to give a little trigger warning before I go into this next one, as we use terms that are probably considered a bit triggering for people nowadays. But going straight to the 1970s and 80s, following the 1969 Stonewall Uprising in New York City, queer language began to evolve in new and powerful ways. This era marked a shift from secrecy and survival toward open expression, pride, and resistance. I find that so fascinating.
It was like such a pivotal moment.
Yeah. And it was also by people of colour, like a trans, queer coloured woman.
Yeah. Someone who was the most repressed.
Literally.
Yeah.
Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the terms gay, lesbian, and bisexual gained wider acceptance, not only as descriptors, but as political identities. These labels were no longer whispered or hidden. They were used loudly and proudly as part of fight for visibility and equal rights. Equally significant was the reclamation of once derogatory slurs. Words like dyke and fag began to be reappropriated by the community as tools of empowerment.
See, I still don't like those words.
I don't like those words either.
I know that a lot of our community have reclaimed them, and I know like that's great for them, but I still find there's such negativity still attached.
Yeah.
So like I would never want to describe my friends as those terms.
No,
and I
neither.
would never describe myself as that. I can understand when you're having a bit of fun and stuff with the girls or the guys or our non-binary friends. Like, if you have inside jokes, that's fine. I'm like, but on a greater scale, like, I would never.
No, I would never either. I think like this time, this era of when everything was such an uprising, and isn't it funny how, you know, we've done a labels episode where we've gone, oh, we don't really know how helpful or harmful the labels are, but in this particular era, it was reclaiming the power back. So those labels were so important at that time.
Well, it's also like, it's the difference between me going, oh, do you know blah, blah? Did you know she's a lesbian?
Yeah.
And then you going, oh, did you know I'm a lesbian? Like, it's like that proudness or that secrecy, like you just said.
Literally. By turning these insults into declarations of identity, LGBTQIA plus people challenge societal stigma and reshape the cultural meaning of the language used against them. Mm-hmm. Marchers and activist groups deliberately use these terms to assert ownership and redefine their narratives.
I know I've said this before, but we're here, we're queer. I love that.
In parallel, queer people of colour, especially the Black and Latinx, were building an entirely distinct cultural and linguistic universe through drag and ballroom scenes. Particularly in New York City, these underground spaces offered not only community and artistry, but also shared vocab that helped define and protect identities.
We see this. You and I have just started watching Pose.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to talk
in
about
the
that.
beginning of Pose. If anyone hasn't watched Pose, our friend DJ Bexis, she recommended that we start watching Pose. It is brilliant.
Yes.
The episodes are long, but there is so much to unpack, and it's so good to see the evolution of culture.
Yeah. We also see a lot of the vocab and terminology, again, through RuPaul's Drag Race, bringing it to mainstream. Mm-hmm. In saying that, the ballroom scene introduced or popularized a range of expressive and strategic terms, including realness.
Oh, yes. Bringing realness.
Yeah. The ability to convincingly present a specific social role, such as an executive or schoolgirl, often as a survival tactic in a hostile world.
Yeah.
So giving
Lauren is bringing schoolgirl realness.
Yeah. Shade.
She's not. If
No,
anyone's
I'm not.
watching the video, she's not.
Shade, a subtle form of insult used with wit and flair, often rooted in critique rather than cruelty.
I love that word. Shade is great.
Shade is great.
Shade never made anybody less gay, so uh-oh.
Okay, we don't have the rights for that. Reading.
Oh, yes. Reading is
Fundamental.
Yep.
The performative act of calling someone out, often humorously or theatrically, highlighting their flaws with style and intent. Or voguing, a dance form that mimicked fashion magazines' poses, incorporating storytelling, competition, and self-expression.
Also, while we're on voguing, I have another side note.
Oh, side quest.
Education for you. You know the very famous duck walk?
Yeah.
Did you know that's also something that masters made slaves do through like rice fields?
I only did know that because you told me this previously.
Yeah, so the duck walk, everyone, it used to be a punishment that people would make their slaves do through the fields because they had done something wrong. And so I think it is such an amazing thing for people of a repressed community like the queer community to make it something amazing out of that. Like, it's now this worldwide phenomena of a dance in the queer community, whereas it came from such a awful place.
I think maybe it shows you're coming from that place of oppressed into this form of expression and freedom. So it's the same thing of the queer community.
It's like, you can't make me duck walk. I'm going to fucking duck walk because I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
It's a big fuck you.
Reclaiming, as we say.
So, documented in the 1990 film Paris is Burning, this era's language would eventually influence global popular culture, even as its roots remain deeply tied to the lived experience or marginalized queer communities.
Like RuPaul's Drag Race, we're saying. It was brought to the forefront.
Sure was.
And like, I think because Drag Race has a very big straight audience as well, I think it's really good to see that people outside of the queer community know what some of these terms mean, and they're happy to help share them
and they're
with
still
us.
accepting of it.
Yeah, it's so amazing.
This one is also a little bit of a trigger warning, only because we mention AIDS.
Yeah.
So during the 1980s and 1990s, as the HIV/AIDS crisis devastated the community, language became a powerful tool of survival, resistance, and activism. Amid widespread loss and institutional neglect, queer activists created a lexicon that reframed narratives and fought stigma. While terms like HIV and AIDS entered the mainstream discourse, the community developed its own linguistic arsenal, rallying around phrases like silence equaling death
Oh.
and ignorance equaling fear, coined up by ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash the Power. I have never known that was what it was, but in the movie Rent, that is all about the queer community and AIDS, they sing a part that goes, ACT UP, fight AIDS.
Oh,
and I was like, that
wow.
makes so much sense to
Yeah.
me now. These slogans appeared on protest art, posters and signs, turning language into protests. Terms such as POS, HIV positive,
Yeah.
Sarah sorting, choosing sexual partners based on HIV status,
Wow, yeah.
and UU, undetectable, untransmittable, emerged from grassroots organising and public health efforts. However, did you know that the concept of safe sex entered global vocabulary shaped by queer-led education and campaigns that emphasised agency and care over fear?
Well, that's because it's not just the queer community that were
Affected
affected
by AIDS.
by AIDS. We all think that because it affected us the most and, we were silenced by it and we were shamed by it and we were
Yeah.
shamed for it. But straight people weren't immune to it.
No.
I remember first seeing it on an episode of The Bold and the Beautiful,
Really?
And I used to watch that trash TV every afternoon as a kid.
With your gran?
No, with my mum.
Huh.
And I remember this one guy, he had shared needles and he was HIV positive, but he wasn't queer.
No.
He wanted
he
to
just
marry.
had shared needles.
Yeah, he wanted to marry this girl. And then it was a massive thing that he was trying to get medication and, she was scared that she was going to get it and how were they not going to transmit it. It was this
Yeah.
big thing, but it was good, I suppose, for me as a kid in the 90s to see even a TV show then portraying it to be not just a queer
thing.
problem.
Yeah.
It was also a straight problem. Yeah.
It just was a problem in general. It was a
Yeah.
health. It was a health problem.
It was a human problem.
Yeah, I like that. It was a human problem.
Yeah.
So this era also saw radical shifts in gender identity language. Words like transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary gained traction with activists like Leslie Feinberg, pushing for greater visibility and liberation beyond binary norms. So from the 80s,
Yeah. Which is funny because, I've only heard the term genderqueer since we started doing this podcast.
oh, I know, same. And a lot of these terms I didn't know about either, but I just find it funny when people are like, it wasn't around in my
Yeah,
day.
yeah. But this is where the podcast has really opened up my
same.
queer world.
Same.
Yeah.
This one was funny. Groups like the Lesbian Avengers used humour and spectacle to challenge lesbophobia and claim space with slogans such as "We recruit" and "We're flamin'."
Yeah, flamers. See, that's another term that we don't use anymore. Little flamers.
At the same time, coming out transformed into a politicised act of defiance. Activist groups, including ACT UP, Grand Fury, and Queer Nation, created iconic messaging saying, "We die, they do nothing.
Oh, it's so true, though.
Healthcare is a human right."
Still is. We
Bla-
still have that problem in certain countries.
We sure do. Blending art, identity, and protest. This period also marked the rise of intersectionality in the queer discourse following Kimberly Crenshaw's 1989 coinage of the term, prompting deeper reflection on how race, gender, class, and sexuality interconnect.
Mm-hmm.
The linguistic legacy of the AIDS crisis endures in the vocabulary of today's queer activism, identity, politics, and community organising.
Mm-hmm.
If we fast forward to the 2000s and the 2010s in the prime age of the internet, which we briefly touched on earlier,
Yeah.
the rise of the internet catalysed a profound evolution in queer language.
Mm-hmm.
Platforms like LiveJournal, Tumblr, Reddit, and early YouTube became fertile ground for LGBTQIA plus slang to thrive, mutate, and spread globally.
Yeah, Tumblr was a time, hey.
Tumblr was a time.
Tumblr was like whatever you couldn't find on anything else, it was on Tumblr.
Literally. Unlike earlier eras, which relied on localized and often coded language, the digital space enabled instant, anonymous communication across borders, fostering a global queer community with shared linguistic touchstones. Words like top, bottom, and verse, I think that's the same as switch,
Yeah.
once discreetly used in gay male spaces, became openly discussed and humorously dissected in public forums. And we even found that, like, when we spoke to Shannon Malloy, where his first experience of learning what bisexual was
through a chat
room.
Yeah. And it's funny because, again, I had never used the terminology top, bottom,
Oh, neither.
verse, switch. I've never used those terms.
No.
But I'd never heard anyone use those terms until recently. So it's like we have this surge and then it lulls and then it surges again.
Yeah. Simultaneously, terms like femme and masc grew more nuanced, particularly within queer women's and non-binary circles. The term queer itself experienced a notable resurgence.
Yep, I say it all the time now.
Reclaimed from its slur status to serve as a fluid, inclusive identifier embraced by younger generations seeking freedom from rigid categories.
Yeah, because we say all the time, like, everyone wants to put you in a box. Whereas if you go, oh, I'm queer, you could fall anywhere under that umbrella, and people don't need to know more than that. No. They don't even need to know that you're queer.
No.
It's up to you. That's the biggest thing. It's up to you.
It's up to you. This period also marked a significant expansion in language used to describe gender diversity, driven largely by the supportive and exploratory nature of online communities.
Yeah.
Social media allowed trans and non-binary individuals to articulate their experiences and identities in more empowering ways. Pronouns like they, them gained mainstream visibility, and neo-pronouns such as
Z, them, and Z, her
emerged from activist and subcultural spaces.
I actually think that's Z, zer.
Z, zer?
Yeah, I think it's Z and zer.
Okay.
I
have
know,
no
though.
idea.
Yeah.
Identity terms like agender, demi-boy, demi-girl, bi-gender, and gender fluid offered more precise and affirming ways for people to describe themselves.
Don't feel like you have to describe yourself for anyone else, though.
But
just want to put that out there.
Alongside these developments came a vocab that addressed systemic issues, words like misgendering, dead naming, cisnormativity, and gender euphoria entered public discourse, providing language for advocacy, validation, and education. I sure have been educated because I didn't know half these terms.
Same.
Even seemingly small linguistic shifts like saying chest instead of breast carried immense weight in affirming identity.
And see, some people think that's so silly. It's people outside of our community think those things are so silly, but we know all so well how important language can be.
Exactly.
In affecting somebody or affirming somebody or supporting somebody.
And that's not even the queer space. That's just language in general.
Literally, in general.
Meme culture further enriched queer vernacular, introducing a playful yet powerful mode of linguistic expression. Viral phrases again, such as Yas Queen, Slay, Read Them, No Tea, No Shade, Snatched, and It's Giving, spread rapidly.
And gagged.
Oh yeah, and gagged.
Gagked's not there, but in gagged.
Largely rooted in Black and Latinx drag and ballroom culture. Shows like RuPaul's Drag Race and documentaries like Paris is Burning helped bring this language to mainstream audiences. However, the widespread adoption of these terms by non-queer and non-POC individuals sparked important conversations about cultural appropriation.
Yeah, which I think is important because obviously as people who have been marginalized, you want to feel among acceptance and accepting people, but also you don't want those people to pretend that they have lived experience in your shoes when they haven't.
Exactly.
It's the same argument as like, why is there no straight pride? Like,
Yeah.
you know, don't pretend you've walked a mile.
Yeah, exactly. As these expressions became detached from their origins, tensions arose around credit, authenticity, and the erasure of the very communities that birthed them. These debates underscored ongoing racial dynamics within queer spaces, highlighting disparities in visibility and recognition. Ultimately, the 2000s to 2010 represented a linguistic renaissance for the queer community. Technology accelerated both connection and expression, allowing language to evolve at an unprecedented pace. More than just words, this era's vocabulary reflected resilience, identity, and the ever-expanding boundaries of queer experience in globalized digital world.
I'm glad you said in the globalized digital world because I was just thinking the whole reason that we can have things spread so fast nowadays is literally because of the internet.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You could put up one slang tomorrow that no one has ever heard of and one more person will pick it up and then suddenly 10 people and then 20 people and then by next week it's in Urban Dictionary.
Literally.
Yeah.
And we see that every day with
the power of the
language.
internet.
Yeah. With the growing visibility of queer communities, especially with online brands, corporations, and media outlets, they began incorporating queer slang into their messaging, particularly during Pride Month.
They all come out for Pride Month.
Yeah, they don't care any other
So
time.
is this episode. Happy Pride.
Phrases once rooted in subcultural resistance like Yas Queen, Shade, or Slay have been repurposed for advertising, social media clout, or pop culture branding. While this visibility can contribute to normalization and acceptance, it often comes at the cost of context and authenticity. The use of queer language by corporate entities is frequently criticized as performative or opportunistic, because it is, what some call rainbow capitalism. The words queer, inclusive, gender fluid, non-binary, and pansexual have entered mainstream discourse, but are sometimes reduced to trendy buzzwords rather than treated with the complexity and care they deserve.
And see, I guess that's the difference though. Like, there's always going to be positives and negatives. So it's like, as things enter mainstream, would you rather people try and take the positive and then you just deal with the slight negatives of like people making money off it sometimes and people misappropriately using it?
Yeah.
Would you rather not it still be in the mainstream because then it normalizes us more? Because I think so.
I think so too. I think as much as we go on about like rainbow tax and all that drama, we hope that in a way by them normalizing it, it helps offers a thing of acceptance and stuff for us.
More space for acceptance.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. More space for acceptance.
And I think it really does. And I think, you know, the people that push back on things like Pride Month and the people that push back on the inclusivity of some of those words that we've said and, you know, the people that really misappropriate it, I feel like they are the problem. The fact that the words are entering the mainstream is not the problem.
Yeah.
You know, like it's kind of like dangle some bait over a pond and see what bites. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's not everyone. It's not the language.
That's true. Well, as we've done a very long
We have.
long episode. But
it's important to learn these things.
It is important to learn. And like I said, I could have like dribbled on
And we did.
for hours.
But also, I think it's just important to rehash the fact that we say we've touched on all these things before, but there's always something more there.
That's true. There's always so much more education to be had, especially within our own community.
Yeah, and more to learn. And it's the more you can learn to make the person beside you feel more at ease, like, would you not do that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in conclusion, as we come to the end of this episode, we need to note that queer language operates as a form of power, fostering in group solidarity and offering a means of survival, celebration, and resistance. It allows LGBTQIA plus people to name their experiences on their own terms, affirming shared histories and creating community in the face of marginalization. This language helps people reject the limiting definitions imposed by heteronormative society, carving out space for fluid identities and diverse ways of being. However, it's also a contested space. Tensions arise over who gets to use certain terms, especially when slang originating in communities of colour, particularly African American vernacular, from Black, queer and trans creators is adopted by white queer people without context or acknowledgement. Well, I can understand that.
Yeah. It's the same as the cornrows thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Additionally, the fast-paced evolution of queer language can create generational rifts, with older or younger LGBTQIA plus folks sometimes struggling to understand or relate to each other's linguistic codes.
Which is true because a lot of our older generation that are in the queer community are still happy to say words like fag
Or
and
dyke.
and dyke and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And that's great because they feel empowered by those words. They've lived in a time where we haven't lived.
Yeah.
And if they feel fine saying that, I don't think us younger generation should reprimand them for that.
Yeah.
I don't think that we should do that because they've gone through their own journey. I think where the education needs to start is where people in our community, and I know some have, of the older generation say, all this non-binary stuff, we didn't have that shit when I was younger.
Yes, you did.
It's like, yeah, you did. And the fact that you didn't know about it is the same problem and has come from the same space where you had to come from.
Yeah, literally.
And it's literally just the fact that now when we look back, being gay or being a lesbian is still more widely accepted than being trans or non-binary.
yeah, which is really sad.
So we are now just recycling the world that once was again with a new era of people feeling like they are allowed to exist.
It's true. It constantly shifts in response to changing political climates, cultural movements, and technologies. New terms like they fab, referring to non-binary people who present in a femme way. Oh, I didn't know that. Flagging, signaling a sexual preferences through clothing. Oh, there you go. That's a new one for you.
Yeah, that's a new one.
Or even humorous hybrids like girl bossification reflects this creativity.
Haven't heard of any of those.
No, neither. Platforms like TikTok and hashtags such as QueerTok and non-binary are now central to spreading and evolving this lexicon.
Yeah, because as I said before, you can literally click that hashtag and everything you want to know or see about it comes up.
Yeah, exactly. To better understand this linguistic landscape, key resources include The Queer Art of Failure by Jack Halberstam, Gay New York by George Chauncey, and the documentary Paris is Burning, which chronicles the language and culture of 1980s New York ballroom. Ultimately, queer language is not static. It is a living archive, a source of resistance, a cultural map, and a reflection of how queer people continue to find, define, and defend themselves in an ever-changing world.
Yeah, and like we said, language changes all the time. It's never going to stay the same. We've got to keep up with it in a way that we know is not harming other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, ultimately, things change all the time.
They do. Look at the younger generation is such an old
Well, I think about
old
it like
lady.
this. I think about it like this. If you had a Nokia 3310 and the rest of the world had an iPhone latest model, how disconnected would you be from everybody?
Very.
You're technologically behind, so you're not advancing with everybody else. So you're behind in communication in so many ways.
Yeah.
So I feel like to keep up with people on a personal level and to make sure that you are doing the right thing by your peers and those around you, let's just move with the times.
I like that. Move with the times. And in moving with the times, I think that's enough of us for this episode.
Yeah. And, educating ourselves means we weren't born yesterday.
That was a nice roll into
I tried to
moment.
bring it back to
you
the
were bringing
beginning
it back to the beginning.
Because Australian slang is fun.
Australian slang is fun.
Makes
whereas,
absolutely no fucking sense, but it's fun.
Whereas queer language has been very hard.
And let me put it this way. People say that, they don't understand terms like non-binary and they don't understand transgender people and they don't understand the queer community and they don't understand this. And for our Australian audiences, do you understand any of those bullshit sayings that we said at the beginning? No, but you still use them, don't you?
And you still go along with it.
And I think
you
that's
don't have
gonna
a problem.
be us.
That is. So until next time,
You better remember to
stay gay, motherfuckers.
I'm talking about, you're talking about, we're talking about just gay stuff.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just Gay Stuff. Make sure to follow us at Just Gay Stuff Podcast on all your socials and write to us with your stories at justgaystuffpodcast@gmail.com.